Hi, welcome to the Weird World Podcast. I'm Carrie.
Hi, I'm Dean.
And this is going to be a part two.
Part two of the Zodiac. So we talked in the first one about the Zodiac. It's the system in ancient times that was used to keep track of the calendar and for planting times and grow. Wait, hold on. I'm being told it was a different Zodiac. It was indeed the Zodiac serial killer of California of the late 1960s.
Oh, that Zodiac.
That's my fault.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me my horoscope.
You know what the word horoscope means?
We could not think of the word horoscope.
It took a while. We cut that out.
That's hilarious.
So, no, I'm not going to talk about horoscopes. You know, someday we really should do that. But
yeah,
no, this is about the Zodiac, the serial killer. So in the part one, we kind of traced his horrific deeds and how he really became famous. Before it was, he became famous for being one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent serial killer who was never caught, at least since Jack the Ripper. He was also famous contemporaneously for kind of toying with the police and the press, writing lots of letters, writing cryptograms, naming himself. He named himself, said, "This is Zodiac speaking," in one of his early letters. So he almost was sort of his own press agent and made himself very famous. And his fame only was enhanced by the fact that he was never officially caught. Today, though, we are going to look into, first, we're going to talk about some of the murders that a lot of folks think predated the canonical Zodiac murders that happened in 1969, late 1968 through 1969. And then we'll talk about who are the leading suspects and some, I'm going to just say it right now, I have a bias. I think I know, quote unquote, who is the Zodiac murderer. He's probably the most prominent suspect, but I will admit, it's not a perfect case. No one can say with dead certainty this person was the Zodiac. It's the same with Jack the Ripper. So first we're going to talk about some of the other potential victims. Zodiac was famous for credit claiming. He did things like box scores where he said, Zodiac 37, SFPD 0. He went as high as I think 37 was the highest, but one of his biographers named Robert Graysmith, who I mentioned earlier, who is honestly not a source of truth on this, has a lot of things wrong, I think. He claimed that the Zodiac killed 49 people.
Oh, geez.
He's for sure full of shit. That's not true.
Why would he always say SFPD?
It's a great question because that was only the last case, the Paul Stein murder. The original cases were in Napa County, in Vallejo, the city of Vallejo in Solano County, all in Northern California. But yeah, he really picked on the SFPD because the Paul Stein murder really catapulted him into sort of national fame. And it was the most, the SFPD was a much bigger media. And I think, I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
Is that so he picked on San Francisco and really interacted with people at the San Francisco Chronicle and people at San Francisco Police Department from that point forward, and kind of ignored the Vallejo folks and the Napa sheriffs who were also involved in investigating his earlier crimes. So, yeah, that is interesting. No, he did, didn't he?
He could have just
really
said police.
But he really picked on San Francisco. He had that one letter to the Los Angeles Times, but even in that one, he didn't, do anything with the LAPD.
Right.
So, yeah, he did kind of focus on San Francisco. He did kind of credit claim. Some people think he may have killed some other people. So just fairly briefly before we get to the suspects, which is going to be the main part of this episode. There's a person as early as April 9th, 1962, a man named Raymond Davis was murdered in the city of Oceanside, which is in Southern California.
Yeah.
It's in San Diego County.
Quite a ways away.
A very long ways, for sure. Raymond Davis was kind of famous because his murder was connected with someone else, a murderer who also sort of taunted the police. So an unknown person called the Oceanside, I believe the Oceanside Police Department, and said, "I'm going to pull something here in Oceanside and you'll never be able to figure it out." And that's it. He hung up and was like, okay, whatever. It's a crank, right?
Yeah.
At 11:10 that night, a cab driver named Raymond Davis, 29-year-old cab driver, told his dispatcher, said, "Hey, I've got someone down in South Oceanside. I'm going to pick him up." Did not hear from him again that night. The next day, his body is found near the house that belonged to the mayor of the city in a kind of a very nice gated community called St. Malo in Oceanside, like one of the very best neighborhoods in Oceanside, reminiscent of the San Francisco killing.
Right.
It was a cab driver. He was murdered in a very high end, in kind of the Presidio area of northern San Francisco, very, very nice and high value kind of an area. So, people would look back on that and say, okay, You see some
Yeah.
similarities: a cab driver, a nice neighborhood,
Yeah.
and taunting the police. A few days later, the same person presumably called the police again and said, "Do you remember me calling you last week and telling you that I was going to pull a really baffling crime? I killed the cab driver and I'm going to get me a bus driver next." You remember the Zodiac would much later, 7 years later, would threaten
Yeah.
school buses and
Yeah.
children's buses.
But didn't he
And
threaten to kill the kids?
he threatened to kill
Yeah.
the kids. Yeah. He threatened
Yeah.
to, as they came bouncing out,
Right.
he would shoot the kiddies one at a time.
Yeah.
It really wasn't, though, until years later where people kind of stumbled onto this case and said, hey, maybe that was the Zodiac 7 years or, almost 7 years, not quite, before he murdered his first sort of official victim.
Yeah.
So there's no evidence whatsoever. It just has some intriguing coincidences. I don't know. We don't have to keep score right now.
Yeah.
If we were keeping score, I say no. This was not a Zodiac killing. It just has some interesting parallels, I guess, but it doesn't. It's not. The next case was a teenage couple. Remember, he started out killing teenage couples. The Zodiac's first killings were young couples. In 1963, June of 1963, Robert Domingos and his fiancée, Linda Faye Edwards, were only 18 and 17 respectively.
Oh, jeez.
They were killed by someone just on the beach. They were actually ditching school. They went to Lompoc High School, which is along in the Central Valley. This is, I believe, Santa Barbara County. It's a beach in, I think, northern Santa Barbara County, not by the city of Santa Barbara necessarily, but they ditched school. They went to the beach, and someone killed them. And that, again, the Zodiac would later on, he would attack young courting couples in isolated areas.
Were they in a car?
I think they were out on the beach and they were killed. They were shot from the bluffs above them.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, they were out there. I think it was on June 4th. But the next day, their parents were like, "What happened to our kids?" They went looking for them, and it was kind of a really isolated beach. And the police found them only when they went looking for them. No, I'm sorry. They were killed by someone on the beach, but there was evidence that they were, at least the murderer attempted to bind them and attempted to control them, and we don't know. They run away or whatever. He shot them, or for whatever reason, he was not able to gain control of them, and he shot them and killed them.
So a little bit like Lake Berryessa.
Very much like Lake Berryessa Lake. Yeah, it's Berryessa Lake here, not Lake Berryessa.
No, it's not. It's Lake Berryessa.
Damn it! What if it is Lake Berryessa?
It is Lake Berryessa. I mean, that's what all the signs say.
Okay, damn it. I love the way I authoritatively just corrected you.
I thought you were
completely wrong. I thought you're not going to cut that out, are you?
No,
okay.
I thought you were doing reverse psychology, trying to make me doubt myself.
Let's go with that. That's what I was doing. So, again, this is just sort of, I don't know. You're looking at this after the fact. You find a murder that was young courting couples in an isolated area that maybe or maybe not.
Yeah,
he tried to gain control of them is highly unlikely.
Sure. I mean, it's literally 50-50. It
well,
could be because it's very very similar.
How probability works.
I mean,
it's probably. I mean, right.
It could be, or it could not be.
Okay,
it's 50-50.
Again, I can't stress enough. That's not how probability works. Not everything's a coin toss.
Yeah, but it isn't a probability thing.
It kind of is. And
why?
Well, if you look at the totality of evidence,
sure.
I mean, think about that. In the universe of murders, this is, in a place where he did not do anything, et cetera, et cetera. There's just years before he committed the crimes that made him well known. So
it is
still several years.
It is very similar, but but like you said, did he ever claim credit for specific things? Did he ever name them? You know what I mean?
He did one, which we talked about last time. We'll talk about here again in a minute.
Okay.
Yes, but
because he talked about the Riverside one.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
exactly.
But
Jerry Joe Bates.
Okay, but he didn't necessily say the name, Santa Barbara one or the Oceanside one.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah.
And the next one was very, very similar. It was Johnny Ray and Joyce Ann Swindle, husband and wife, on February 5th, 1964. By the way, they're both 19 years old. Again, that sort of attracts these people looking for these things. I don't know who found these things. I feel like people just went back and sort of data mined in a sense.
Yeah.
And found these things. Hey, there's some parallels here. Maybe that was Zodiac.
Yeah.
So this was
which is not illegitimate. I mean, it's
not
a legitimate thing,
but potentially.
There's
great danger in data mining of any sort.
Yeah.
And it seems like that. But this was also a sniper with a 22 caliber rifle. In this case, though, I was mixing up the previous I said from a bluff. This is the one that was shot. They were shot from like a cliff or bluff above the beach where they were on. They were, by the way, there were a couple from Alabama, and they were honeymooning in San Diego. So you've heard of Ocean Beach.
Uh-huh.
It's that area of San Diego. So they're on the California honeymoon.
Yeah.
And it didn't go well. They were murdered
Yikes.
by a sniper, effectively,
on
the beach.
What year? This one?
This was 1964, February of 1964. Because the beaches in February in California are balmy and they're actually quite cold and chilly.
Yeah.
But Joyce died, but the man, he lived for several hours. Johnny Ray, he died later in the hospital. Again, kind of the same thing. In this case, Johnny's mother would tell police, oh, he didn't have any enemies, no one would want to kill him. So his sister would later theorize that it was the Zodiac. So in this case, it appears the family kind of glommed on and say, hey, maybe my brother was killed by the Zodiac. So, there was a likely suspect at the time. It was an old man who kind of lived in a shack on the beach, and he was known to be kind of, violent and not very friendly. There's another couple of killers. People just kind of chalked it up at the time to sort of a thrill killer, but later on, they would sort of researchers would match this with, again, it's kind of like Berryessa, I guess, a little bit, by the water at Lake Berryessa. I know you think it's Berryessa Lake, but it's actually Lake Berryessa.
Uh-huh.
And some people have said, like, oh, look, Lake Berryessa, Santa Barbara, Ocean Beach, all by the water.
And two words in them?
And also 2 words. I hadn't thought about that, but good one. The stupidest kind of a theory.
Yeah.
I hate those things. Like every psychic,
I was gonna
the body's gonna be found, it'll be near water.
Well, yeah.
Oh, you mean almost anything?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be if it's in a bathtub or a canal, that works. The next one, of course, is what we refer to as Cherry Joe Bates. A lot of people think this is the 1966. We did a whole episode. Please go back and listen to it right now. We also briefly discussed it last time. This was a Riverside Community College 18-year-old who was murdered outside the library by almost certainly the police, we think, believe that they know who did it. And almost certainly is a person who did it. And that person did indeed, as we talked about, his name is Ross Sullivan. He did later on apparently moved to Northern California. He also eventually wound up in an insane asylum. So it's not impossible. But again, it's fairly certain that Ross Sullivan killed Cherry Joe Bates. So you have to believe that Ross Sullivan was the Zodiac killer for this to be linked to the Zodiac murders. We'll talk about Ross Sullivan in a minute. But I'll just sort of spoiler alert. I think it's highly unlikely Ross Sullivan was the Zodiac killer, and he's one of the weaker candidates.
When was he in the institution?
It was after the murders. I think 71, something like that.
Oh, okay.
And so after the murders, sure, yes, true.
Okay.
But we'll talk about it in a minute. But this one is, this is one of the more intriguing ones. Of the ones we just mentioned here so far, she's the most likely one to have been a Zodiac killing, but I don't think she was.
Okay.
The next one is one of my favorite names, Enidine Molina and Fermin Rodriguez. This happened in June 8th, 1967. So at least we're getting closer to the first murders, which were at the end of 1968. These were a little bit older. They're both in their mid-30s, and they were, at least though they were up in Northern California now, they were parked along Velocitos Road in Alameda County. That's the East Bay. That's not too far
from San Francisco.
From where and one of the letters that was sent to the newspapers that was supposedly from the Zodiac was postmark, may have been trademark, postmark from Pleasanton, which is in Alameda County as well. But that probably was a fake. But anyway, this a stranger went up to them, and I guess it said, hey, get out of your car with a gun. And he shot Fermin, the male, Rodriguez, killing him. And he abducted Enidine Molina. He's driving around. I guess he must have been driving southwest, because at the Sunol Regional Wilderness, which is in, I don't know if that's Santa Clara County or still Alameda County, but anyway, it's they're moving towards San Jose. Again, I say these things geographically. Yeah. If you're down to the Bay Area, it's not going to help you at all. I apologize. But she tried to escape. Now, this is going to be interesting, because this is going to have a parallel in a minute I'll tell you about. But Molina tried to escape, and he shot and killed her when she attempted to escape in this kind of a lonely road.
So that's very different.
It is very
then.
different,
Yeah.
but it's going to have a parallel with the Kathleen John story, we're going to tell you in just a second.
Okay.
The police at the time thought it was like rape and robbery or something like that, but they weren't sure at all. And again, it's pretty tenuous. This is just some, who knows who this was, a bad person with a gun.
Yeah.
So before we get to Kathleen Johns, though, there was a quick one. John Franklin Hood and Sandra Garcia, yet another one. This is from February 21st, 1970. Now, if you're keeping track, this would have been after his last canonical Zodiac killing of Paul Stein in San Francisco in 1969. John Franklin was 24. His fiancée, Sandra, was 20. They were in the East Beach, and we're now back in Santa Barbara, down in more southern California, the central coast of California. Okay. And they were just on the beach. It was at night. And the next day, they just sort of didn't come home. The next day, their fully clothed bodies were discovered under a blanket on the beach in Santa Barbara County. Hood, the male, had been stabbed 11 times in the face and back for the most part. His girlfriend or his date, Garcia, had been stabbed so much she was impossible to recognize.
Wow.
She was brutally attacked and horrible, which is, again,
different.
No, not really different. Remember, he did tend
that's
to
true. He
focus
stabbed,
a little more
on the
his
woman.
anger apparently at the woman when he attacked couples. And he also did at Lake Berryessa was stabbings.
Yeah.
So, you can see some parallels here. It was, but, at this point, I feel like every murder of a couple, especially a young couple, is just being ascribed to the Zodiac. There's just no reason to think this was him. He didn't take, there weren't any at the time contemporaneously. He wasn't like trying to take credit for it or anything like that. So you would think he would. Again, probably not. The next one is considered because the victim of this next crime claimed that the Zodiac had done it. So it's Kathleen Johns. It's March 22nd, 1970. She's 22 years old. She's driving up to Petaluma, which is beyond. It is, I guess, technically the North Bay of the Bay Area, but it's even further north than Vallejo, where he did his initial crimes. But it's not too far away. It's in roughly the same area. She had a 10-month-old daughter with her. She's driving from Southern California, by the way. So I mean, like a 10-hour drive.
Wow. Yeah.
With her 10-month-old daughter. She was also, by the way, 7 months pregnant.
Oh,
so
wow.
I don't think this was a good idea. It turns out it was a very bad idea. She left from San Bernardino at about 4:30 p.m. That's another thing, too.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, she's not going to be there until really the next morning after midnight, for sure. It was 11:30. She's still down in Patterson, which is kind of the upper Central Valley. So she's probably, I'm guesstimating, 2/3 of the way there. 11:30 at night. She's on Highway 132 in kind of a lonely area. It's still fairly rural now, near Patterson. And the car behind her blinks its lights at her. If a car behind you blinks its lights at you, don't fucking pull over, people, especially if you're a single female. Good God. So, but the car kind of pulled alongside her and kind of like said, pull over. And I guess indicated like it's your wheel.
Something's wrong with your car.
Your wheel.
That old trope.
Yeah, exactly. So she pulls over. He comes out and goes, yeah. And he comes up and says, hey, your wheel's really loose. It was totally wobbling. Don't worry, I can fix it. So he goes over and he's fixing the tire. And I think if I'm going to go by memory of this one, but it like fell off as soon as she drove away. It fell off. He's like, oh God, I tried to fix it. No, you loosened it, bro. So he says, you know what? There's a gas station just up here. I know where it is. I think it was even almost like close enough where you could see the lights of it.
Yeah.
And she says, I'll just give you a ride to that gas station and you can get your car fixed. And so she gets in his car and she gives him a ride to the gas station and he passes the gas station. And then he passes another gas station. And it turns into a 3.5-hour ordeal of him driving around rural upper Central Valley, California, threatening her. Just sometimes silent, but at other times threatening her. Kathleen Johns, the woman, at one point, she asked him, like, do you often help strangers along the way? And his reply was, by the time I get through with them, they won't need my help. Who says that?
Yeah.
He and then he also said, I'm going to kill you. But he doesn't kill her for 3.5 hours.
Wait, and I'm assuming the baby's with
the baby's with her. She's got the baby in her lap.
Yeah.
Remember, she's also 7 months pregnant. He finally sort of stops somewhere. It's out kind of like like a farm, not a farm. I mean, it's a paved road. But think of California has a lot of paved roads, but they're really kind of farm roads. They're really meant for farms to get in contact and to get your produce out of farms on tractors and trucks and things like that.
Yeah.
And they'll often have like a ditch on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty steep ditch. It's an irrigation ditch and for floodwaters as well. She claims that he stopped and she popped out of the car, ran off, and jumped into one of those irrigation ditches.
Okay.
Now, even if it's a dry time of the year, this is in March 1970, it probably wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got the
Who
weather
knows?
report for that,
Yeah.
but that was still at the end of the damper season for California. So
Yeah.
it's unlikely. And yes, I am saying California. So that was, again, also intentional, like Lake Mira. So.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that she hid there for quite some time, and she could like hear him. He's out there stalking her and looking around for her, but he's not going to look in the ditch.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's night in her. You can tell I'm very skeptical.
But also, how is she keeping the baby completely silent?
In a lonely
Yeah.
rural road? Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said finally she heard him leave, so she got up and she was able to, where did she go? I think she got to a gas station or something like that along the road. Or maybe she was a passerby, I think, which is also, really? You're going to trust all the passerby? The passerby could be that dude in the car who just...
Yeah.
But she says a passerby did indeed pick her up. That much we know, because the passerby did pick her up and he took her to a police station. And then she okay, this is right. This Zodiac is still the enemy number one in California, especially in Northern California. She looks at a poster and says, oh my God, that's him. It's the famous Paul Stein picture with the guy in the glasses, with the kind of crew cut haircut. And she says, that's him. That's the Zodiac. Well, that's the guy who did these things to me. And she then relays her story. Her story would change multiple times and it would morph and alter. It's just not, it doesn't, 3.5 hours. That's incredibly un-Zodiac like.
Yeah. None of it.
If she didn't say, that's him, I know him, I'm ID'd him, you might believe it. But the fact that she's ID'ing a person we know did nothing remotely like that in any other case, honestly, I don't think it ever happened. I'm not trying to, pass judgment on her or say terrible things about her, but I think she made the whole thing up. I do. And a lot of people do. Her story kind of just sort of collapsed.
Did they find her car with the wheel falling off of it and all that kind of stuff? I mean, theoretically, they would go back to her car, right?
Yeah, they did. I don't know. I know a lot of folks who research this think her story is untrue.
Okay.
A lot of people who want it to be the Zodiac think it's true because they want it to be the Zodiac. They want as many Zodiac cases as they possibly can, but this is not true. The other one, of course, you've also heard about. It was on June 9th, 1970. It was Rich Radetich, which I may have mispronounced his name last time. I apologize. He was a 25-year-old SFPD, San Francisco Police Department cop who was shot. He was serving a parking ticket in the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood of San Francisco, this was the age of Aquarius. This was a super hippie, kind of a commune almost neighborhood of San Francisco. And he was in his squad car and shot through the window. And about a week later or so, the Zodiac would claim that, quote, he shot that man in a parked car with a .38. And so he claimed credit for this.
Yeah.
The San Francisco police always thought this was not the Zodiac. This had nothing to do with the Zodiac. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't read a ton of details about this case. It could have been. He certainly shot Paul Stein
in a car.
That.
Yeah.
He was indeed taunting the San Francisco Police Department at the time. But for whatever reason, the police at the time ruled out this was a Zodiac. But there are some folks who think it was.
Yeah.
And then there was a weird case because it happened up in the Lake Tahoe area, which is on the Northern California border with Nevada.
Yeah, but there's a lake there. It's water.
Oh, you're right. So it almost certainly was his. Was there water where the cop at Haight-Ashbury? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, there may have been a shower nearby. Actually, given the people of Haight-Ashbury, there probably was not a shower nearby. So, sorry, I'm just saying terrible things about hippies. So Donna Lass was a woman lived in Lake Tahoe, and in March 22nd, 1971, she was a nurse. She was 25 years old. She was last seen in September 6th, 1970. So Paul Avery, in 1971, would get a postcard from the Zodiac, and it alluded to this murder in Tahoe, and he traced it to Donna Lass, who was last seen. She disappeared on September 6th, 1970, a few months before that, in State Line, Nevada, which is interesting because Stateland, Nevada is down by Las Vegas.
Right.
But this is in
In
Tahoe.
Tahoe.
I don't understand why they say, I don't
Yeah.
think there's a Stateland, Nevada. There's South Lake Tahoe City, and it kind of straddles California, Nevada border.
Right.
There, but it's not called Stateland. So I'm not sure if the source I read that just got that wrong or what. I didn't feel like looking at that anymore because it's not that. Because it's again, it's just a woman who disappeared, and there's some weird mystery around it. But it's the the postcard from Lake Tahoe that was sent to Paul Avery that was supposedly from the Zodiac several months later, just sort of connected it to it and it said something about sought victim 12, and it had the so to me it seems like it's could have been someone who was just pretending to be said. This is one of those, because there were lots of those letters.
Yeah.
Most experts think were just forged. There was lots of copycat Zodiac fake letters. I feel like this is probably one of them. Her skull was found in 1986, 16 years after she disappeared. So she was murdered.
Yeah.
We don't know by whom.
And that's not
There's
how.
no reason to think of anything to the Zodiac.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing. A smart serial killer will change up his MO and do things different, right? Use different weapons, choose different kinds of victims.
I'm glad you're giving tips to serial killers. Please go on, Carrie. How else would they get away with murder? Tell us some tips.
That's not going to help them get away with it necessarily.
Actually, it is.
Not necessarily. They just might not. I mean, they still have just as much of a chance of getting caught for that particular murder then. I'm just saying
Carrie,
all of their
backtracking
murders
rapidly at this
might
point.
not be connected, and they might not be deemed a serial killer if they switch things up.
So your
That's all I'm
pro-serial
saying.
killing leanings are pretty clear, I think, to our listeners.
No.
But I mean, there's others who have connected him to, like, there was a series of murders called the astrological murders. And, obviously you're going to connect him to that. I think they were in like Sonoma County. There was a bunch of murders of hitchhikers in and around Santa Rosa, which is around Sonoma County. They have been connected to the Zodiac. And it's not impossible. That is true, because the person I think did it was nearby, and the Vallejo and the Berryessa killings were nearby. So there's lots of these.
Yeah.
Did the Zodiac really kill 37? You know my opinion. I think he took credit for things he had nothing to do with because he's just building the legend.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was very conscious. He wasn't a psychotic who thought he was going to have slaves in the afterlife. It was just a cool thing he thought up that made him memorable and was the story that he was spinning.
And he
to the
wanted
police.
credit.
And he wanted credit for things, and he wanted to sound crazy and insane and dramatic and memorable and famous. And he was successful at it, even though they weren't all that clever. So now we get to who was the Zodiac. And there's a fair number. I'll go through the biggest ones and then end with the one who I think is probably the most likely suspect. So I'm already spoiling these first ones, or ones I don't think, but I could be wrong. So the first one is Earl Van Best Jr. He was, of course, someone who's accused by who of being the serial killer? Who do you think?
His son.
His son. Absolutely. Gary Stewart and Susan Mustafa published a book called The Most Dangerous Animal of All, Searching for My Father and Finding the Zodiac Killer. Atrocious title, first of all. And Stewart was the son. He claimed that he was searching for his biological father, so not the father he grew up with.
Okay.
And he found Earl Van Best Jr. as his biological father, and his further, investigations of this led him to believe that Earl Van Best Jr. was the Zodiac killer. It was he looked a little bit like, allegedly, the composite sketch, which was the worst. If your connection is, he looked a bit like that, it's utterly worthless. I mean, a lot of people do, and you can make anyone kind of see it. If you're, like I said, if you're roughly the same age, white guy who's not, I don't know, obese or something, then and anytime could have had a crew cut, you could look like the Zodiac.
My dad was roughly the same age, white
Absolutely.
guy, did not look like him at all.
You know what? Honest, I'm not just saying this to be funny. If you did a picture of your dad next to Zodiac and you put glasses on him, you could say it's close enough to say, you know what, it's not impossible.
You know what?
I'm not saying your dad was a Zodiac killer, but I'm not saying your dad was not the Zodiac
I'm
killer.
pretty sure my dad was not the Zodiac killer because
I feel like someone could write a book about that, though.
He it wasn't in Northern California at that time.
That you know of. Business trips, Carrie.
My dad didn't take business trips.
Don't ruin it for me.
But he, Yeah, I guess maybe he did have more of a
God,
crew
it's all
cut.
coming out. Yeah, for
But
sure.
his face didn't look that way, and he didn't wear glasses like that.
He disguised, Gary. It's clearly a disguise. They were clear glasses. This guy,
I'm 100% sure my dad
I'm
is not
sure
the
he was a
serial
serial killer. And he's not alive to deny it. I smell a book deal, Carrie. Let's do this. Let's make it happen. So this guy that Gary Stewart also said, his finger, a partial fingerprint. I don't know who tested that fingerprint. Gary, maybe. He also said he had handwriting that was similar. Sure he did, Gary. And that something about, he also liked to do encryption. He didn't really know his biological father.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely.
Wait, when he found his biological father, was he still alive? Or was he dead and he just...
That's I think he was dead. Because he didn't publish the book until 2014. And then in 2020, the FX network made a documentary series about it. So now it's bullshit.
Okay.
And, so the whole idea of uncovering that Stewart had... Stewart tells a story of how, blah, blah, blah. It turns out, though, when they were doing that story, they found that Gary Stewart had messed around with police reports and things like that to make it seem his dad was a Zodiac killer. So he was a fraudster, basically.
He wanted to write a book.
And it turns out his dad was in Europe during the Zodiac.
Oh, geez.
So at least, to their credit, FX did some work and found out that their subject was completely full of shit. So, and again, he had these DNA analysis done, and experts took another look and said, no, you're full of crap. Anytime you hear private DNA, like lawyers do that and things like that, honestly, take that with a grain of salt. I don't want to cast aspersions at DNA places, but I do think it's like expert witnesses in court cases where your next paycheck is going to come from a defense lawyer, and your job is to make it seem like that defense lawyer's client is not guilty. And there's a cottage industry of, expert witnesses who that's what they do. I could see that being true also in the lab testing world. Like, your business functions by pleasing a certain clientele, and that clientele wants a certain answer. And the answer in this case is always, in this case, is that, there's a connection. In court cases, is that whoever that client is, they're not guilty. That's just my jaded belief, but it's also true. So here's the thing, though. The producers of the documentary hid their knowledge until the last episode, like the last part of the last episode.
Yeah.
So they knew the entire, I don't know how many parts there was.
That he was in Europe the whole time?
It was complete bullshit. The story is absolute nonsense, but they didn't say it. And by the way, everything we've said so far in all the episodes is bullshit.
Yeah.
So pretty scummy. The next case is Gary Francis Post. And you might remember that because he was the person accused by that group that at the end of part one, we talked about them where they supposedly found evidence here in the 2020s, 2021, I think it was. And they had a show on I can't remember what one of those, what's they called, the Case Breakers. Remember that? It's an independent group. They're supposedly, and they absolutely, they said that they had broken one of the cryptograms that the Zodiac wrote. And also that they had identified Gary Francis Post. He was the one, one of the identifications, because Gary Francis Post had scars on his forehead. And the little wiggly lines on the famous sketch were supposedly scars when, for sure, they were little wiggly lines that were not really there. It was just the artist just throwing in some dashes there just to make it look a little,
they're wrinkles.
The wrinkles, exactly. And that, so they're just, and they also connected with Cherry Joe Bates. This group, the Case Breakers. The Case Breakers are, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, completely full of shit. They're just looking for TV deals and book deals. They're just trying to make money off famous cases. That's what they've done another famous case, and they're doing another one, since then. Complete nonsense. Gary Francis Post has nothing to do with that. He was a douchebag. He was like a wife beater and things like that. So he's a violent monster, but he had nothing whatsoever to do with the Zodiac, and there's no reason to think that. And I think they probably know that, but they don't care because they're going to cash a check.
Yeah.
Was I mean to you, Case Breakers? Fuck off. Okay. You're scammers. So just a complete bullshit connection. Another one, again, and you'll notice that this one wasn't presented until 2017. See how late they are? See how long after the fact most of these ones have
I do see
so
that.
far? This one in 2017 was Giuseppe Bevilacqua. And he was accused by an Italian journalist named Francesco Amiconi.
This is weird.
Well, those are all fantastic names, by the way.
I
Giuseppe
know,
went by
but
Joe.
yeah.
He was a retired U.S. Army sergeant, and he was a suspect in the Zodiac. But the connection with him was because he was also a suspect in the Monster of Florence case, which is the horrific series of murders in Florence.
Yeah.
That has been made into a really terrible Netflix mockumentary that's insanely boring and poorly done. Remember, you couldn't watch it.
Did we
started
start
to watch
that
it, but
one?
this is the worst.
Oh,
It's like one of those dramatization kind of
Yeah.
documentaries, and it was just awful.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty famous case. It's one of the most famous European serial killer cases out there. And I think it was like in the, oh God, when was it? Was it in the, hold on one second.
It seemed like it was
a long time ago, yeah.
like 50s, 60s, or
The Monster of Florence was The Monster of Florence was active from 1968 to 1985.
wow.
And so, but this person was considered, Bevilacqua was sort of, I guess, a suspect in the Monster of Florence. And this is just trying to attach two famous serial killers to each
Together,
other.
yeah.
There's absolutely idiotic. Again, they claim like they had DNA evidence, and it never.
So what they
nothing's
think
happened
after he
since
finished
then.
in California, he went back to Italy.
But it overlaps though, because if he killed someone in 68, he killed people in 69. So he had to be
Yeah,
traveling
that's
back
true.
and forth between Italy and California
Yeah.
to start in the start of the murders and the end of the murders.
Silly.
It's stupid.
Yeah.
Lawrence Kane was he was investigated and presented by a retired police detective named Harvey Hines. It's not that meaningful, but at least it's someone who you would think have some level of expertise in this. And Hines investigated this case in the 1980s, and he at the time, so he's looking at Lawrence Kane as a potential Zodiac killer in the 1980s. He gets a picture of it and he shows it to Kathleen Johns. Remember the person who supposedly said that
Yeah.
the Zodiac killed her, but I'm sorry, drove her around.
Yeah.
She escaped.
There's a flaw in that.
There's a flaw in that. And Kathleen Johns said, yeah, that's him. The flaw is, of course, Kathleen Johns is completely
Yes.
bullshit as well. Remember, she also ID'd the guy in the Zodiac, and I don't know if Lawrence Kane, I think I've seen a picture. Again, he just looks like a white guy of
Yeah.
roughly the same age. There's no compelling, again, there's no compelling resemblance to him. And these sketches are just sketches from the memories of witnesses via the interpretation of a sketch artist. They're not
Yeah.
pictures. They're not picture perfect. So, but she that gave Hines ammunition to say, yeah, I've got him. It's Lawrence Kane. That's the guy. And that he supposedly also showed a picture of Kane to a cop who had seen. Remember one of those cops who had talked to what we now know as the Zodiac killer? And they said, hey, do you see a black guy? And I said, yeah, he went that way.
Right.
One of those police officers also saw a picture of Kane and said, you know what? That does resemble the guy we talked to. This was now this would have been
40
20
years later?
No,
Oh, okay.
I believe this is in the 80s when he shot these pictures.
Okay.
So it would have been still about almost 20 years later when he's seen the pictures. So it's just
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know. One of his pieces of evidence, though, is that Kane lived in South Lake Tahoe. And so he's connected to the Donna Lass case. And there's really no reason to connect to the Donna Lass case as a Zodiac killing. So it's weird.
Yeah.
So you might have captured the murder of Donna Lass, but you didn't capture the Zodiac killer.
Right.
Maybe you can tie him to this South Lake Tahoe murder. I don't know. I haven't looked into it enough, but probably not. Oh, yeah. His other evidence was in 2021, he had got this cryptographer person, a French-Moroccan business consultant and engineer, and who said that he was able to decipher the Z13 and Z32 ciphers. They have not been ciphers. You'll remember they call it Z and the number of characters.
Right.
There's a very small number of characters, so they've never been
It's harder to
deciphered.
crack.
He didn't. He said the Z13 cipher reads KAYR and said that's a typo of KAYE. You recall Kane's name is KANE. Hines has claimed that he sometimes will spell his last name KAYE. These are lots of degrees of problem here.
Yeah.
Not to mention that he didn't decipher anything, dude. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So it's just, It's more nonsense. I'm sorry if I'm being repetitious, but these are all fairly nonsensical. Paul Doerr, Doerr. That's a little bit better of a potential. That's the next one. A person named Jared Kobik wrote a book in 2022 called How to Find Zodiac. And he named Paul Doerr as his primary subject. He lived in the North Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. He had a post office box in Vallejo. We're getting closer now.
Okay.
That's where the first two murders occurred.
Why would you have a post office box in Vallejo if you lived in San Francisco?
No, he lived in nearby. He didn't live in the city. He lived in North Bay, Sonoma County, Solana County. That's
okay.
Marin County. That's all considered the North Bay. I don't know exactly where he lived. Probably Solana County somewhere. I don't know. Somewhere nearby Vallejo. So he had a connection there. He was kind of the right age. He was 42 in 1969, so maybe a little bit older than the Zodiac look. He was at 5'9". Remember, he was 5'9", and stocky was described as one of a couple of witnesses said who lived described the Zodiac. So we're getting a little bit better now. And he would write a lot of letters, and he was a big fan of like weird magazines and like fanzines and things like that. And I guess he wrote a lot for these things. And people who looked into it, like this Jared Kobik, said his writings seemed very reminiscent of Zodiac's writings. All those letters he wrote to the police and to the press at the time. The writer Paul, you ever heard Paul Haynes?
No.
He was the guy who helped write "I'll Be Gone in the Dark."
Oh,
who helped finish that, I believe. The investigator, the book about the
Golden State Killer.
Golden State Killer, yeah. He researched it. He helped. Who's the author again? I'm drawing a blank. It's Patton Oswalt's wife. Totally
Michelle something.
Yes. So he helped research that book with her, and he thought that's a little bit of credibility. He thought that Doerr was, quote, the best Zodiac suspect that's ever surfaced, unquote. Doerr's daughter, again, read the book by Kobik and actually, to her credit, says, I'm going to sue you for libel. My dad was not the Zodiac killer. But I guess as she processed information, she came away thinking, I don't know, maybe. and she did admit that her father could be very violent and very abusive. And so she actually became something of a little bit of a believer in the possibility that her dad, Paul Doerr, was indeed the serial killer. He was a member of like right-wing militant groups, and they would send out threatening letters and talk about communists. And apparently in this group had a symbol that was somewhat similar to the Zodiac symbol of the circle with the target-like symbol of the circle with the cross around it.
I'm assuming he was dead at this time?
By the 2020s when this is happening, yes, he was.
Oh, okay.
But still. So he was also interested and had some knowledge in cryptography, writing these, cryptograms and things like that. So he actually even published a cipher that had to do with he was into The Hobbit and Tolkien and stuff like that. So this has a right-wing nerd.
Yeah.
Who's also abusive and violent. Yeah.
Well, this is.
Yeah. This is actually interesting. I mean, he was, I don't know. He was into cosplaying and stuff like that. And there was something where they had made some connection to that. Remember the outfit he wore, the executioner's outfit that he wore at the Lake Berryessa?
Yeah.
There's some people who think that is, there's some connection to that between that and Paul Doerr. And so I don't know.
Where did he live?
He lived in I just read the North Bay. So I don't know. And he had the P.O. box in Vallejo.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm assuming it was not too far from Vallejo. And he was into the kind of things and he had that sound of the things Zodiac would write in those letters later on. Like the whole, and he was connected to this book, this weird book called The Strange Ways of Man by a person named E. Royston Pike. And in that book, E. Royston Pike talks about how headhunters would kill victims so they'd be slaves in the afterlife. That's a direct connection to Zodiac there. Again, these are very circumstantial, very tenuous, but they're much more real than all of the other ones, I think.
Yeah.
In 1970, this guy wrote a letter to a fanzine. Is it called fanzine or fanzine? Fanzine. I've heard it both ways. I'm going to pretend I've heard it both ways. What?
It's for magazine.
It's a fanzine in Berryessa Lake. Shut up. So, and it used nothing but 1-cent stamps to spite, it was said, the Postal Service.
Oh, sure, because they care.
Well, apparently the Zodiac would also do something like that with his letters.
Huh.
He would use lots of stamps. I don't know. I don't know that.
Why
Would they have to count it or something? What was postage back then? I don't know. 11 cents? I have no idea.
If even that, yeah.
Basically, it's a lot of little tidbits that do connect interestingly to the Zodiac case, but it's clearly far from conclusive. There's a couple more before we get to the actual one, and that's sorry, I'm totally biasing this, but it's a guy named Richard Gaikowski, Gaikowski. He was a person in 1971. He was committed to the Napa State Mental Hospital for mental illness, and he was released later in 1973. If you notice that kind of coincides with when letters stopped.
Yeah.
From the Zodiac. So that, I don't know if that was what initially caught some attention of people, but he was the top suspect of some of the investigators at the time. He was considered a suspect. He had a decent resemblance to that, like they all do. I mean, they're basically the main thing that brought him to the attention was a coworker of his who was known as Blaine. Super. I mean, if he was at least known as Bling, that would have been more interesting. But he's known as Blaine. I don't know what that means.
Wow.
He also had a nickname called Goldcatcher. I don't have the background on why that's anything true, but it is interesting, if weird. He wrote these letters to law enforcement, and he would say Gaikowski was the Zodiac, and so there were, I don't know. What like this guy was crazy, this guy was violent, this guy was the Zodiac. This former coworker.
I mean, I'm more suspicious of Blaine.
I am too. I want to know more about Blaine. In 2009, note that's a very long time now. We're talking about 40 years after the last murders. The History Channel television network, in an episode on a show they called Mystery Quest, they investigate Gaikowski as potentially a Zodiac killer. And he, in fairness to them, he was, I think the police did, in fact, look into him. And there were some folks in the SFPD and the police departments in law enforcement who thought he was a potential suspect. So, in fairness. So the History Channel, and by the way, Goldcatcher, Blaine, he was in the, like disguised in the show. I feel like Blaine
because he was worried.
way too seriously. But so they put him in the show, like, I don't know, in shadow or something.
I'm assuming Gaikowski was dead by this time.
Yeah, he was.
So who was he afraid of?
But he said he had a recording of, because remember, he's a former coworker. He said, here's Gaikowski talking, right? So they had Nancy Slover listen to that recording. Nancy Slover was the Vallejo police dispatcher who took the call from the Zodiac after the second one, the Blue Rock Springs Park attack, the second one. She was and he said, I just killed those kids in the park or whatever he said. Right? So 40 years ago,
how would
very brief conversation.
Were those calls recorded?
I'm
assuming not.
If they were, they didn't exist anymore now.
Yeah.
I don't think
that's
they were.
True. Yeah.
I don't think they were, actually.
Yeah.
And she said, you know what? I think that's him.
That's ridiculous.
Take it for what you want, but I think it's absurd. Even the History Channel, though, refer to Goldcatcher, Blaine, as, quote, a conspiracy theorist with low credibility. This is in 2009. Nowadays, they'd say this guy is gold-plated. Everything he says is the truth. This is for sure. So, that he was considered, he was looked at.
Yeah.
The dispatcher, 40 years later, did identify him as the voice. So maybe it was Richard Gaikowski. Maybe it's just anybody named Richard, because the next suspect is named Richard Marshall, and he was a ham radio enthusiast, and he also, his job was as a movie projectionist. He lived in, wait for it, Riverside in 1966 when Cherry Jo Bates was murdered. And what did he do after that, Carrie?
He moved to Northern California.
He moved to San Francisco, as a matter of fact, and he worked nearby where Paul Stein was murdered in 1969. Notice that puts him in San Francisco, not up in Vallejo and Berryessa. And in my opinion, the first actions were both near Vallejo. It's almost certain that the perp lived very near Vallejo.
What was his
job?
Not
as close as you think. They're about 30 miles away. They're not just like, if you look at a map, you look at Vallejo and San Francisco, it's not that far. But you probably don't know Vallejo intimately. You don't know
back roads,
Lake Herman Road, and that little lonely park in the middle of Vallejo. You probably don't know this little lonely part of San Francisco was the last thing that happened.
But what was his job? We don't know. Maybe he did have some kind of connection to Vallejo.
He was a movie projectionist.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
No, not at all. He worked in San Francisco, the city of. So, but he was weird. So that's good. You have that. People described him as, quote, peculiar, end quote. And he would say things like, hey, I've discovered something, quote, something much more exciting than sex, end quote. You recall that one of the letters, the Zodiac said, like, hey, murder is better than getting your rocks off or something like that. Probably misspelled rocks. And he was a big fan of a movie called The Red Phantom, which is a phrase that was used in one of the possible Zodiac letters.
Oh.
He lived in a basement apartment. Shocking. Which, again, was something referred to in one of the Zodiac letters. Here's my favorite. Like the Zodiac, this is a quote from an article. He owned felt tip pens and, quote, odd-sized paper. And so, hey, and the Zodiac did too. So, I don't know. That kind of clinches it. In 1989, I guess, again, Richard Marshall was considered a suspect. I think at this point, by quote, I'll put air quotes from our researchers, people looking into it, not the police.
Yeah.
And I guess somebody talked to him and he said, yeah, you know what? There are some similarities.
It could have been me.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't remember killing all those people. No, he said it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Intriguing. Yeah, I see your point.
Yeah.
I don't blame you. So no, he died in 2008. The last one we have before we get to our prime suspect is, of course, Ross Sullivan. And Ross Sullivan, I won't belabor that. Ross Sullivan was the person who almost certainly murdered Cherry Jo Bates in 1966 in Riverside College. He did move up to Northern California in 1967, the next year. So he would have been there in 68 and 69 when the murders occurred in Vallejo and Berryessa in San Francisco. He died in 1977. He was institutionalized during the portions of the 70s. I don't know. That's just, if you stop and think about it, what I just said, though, that's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
He really has no other known connection or reason to think he had anything to do whatsoever with the Zodiac killings.
Where did he move to in Northern California?
Nothing. I read multiple sources that he moved to Northern California. So I don't know. What if it could have been
Redding? I mean, who knows?
A long way away. Yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. But he was mentally ill. He probably did murder an 18-year-old girl in 1966. So it's not impossible. I think it's probably not likely. A quick one, just because is another Richard Hoffman. He was accused in 2024. He was accused by his
son.
Carrie.
Daughter.
Grandson.
Oh, grandson.
His grandson. It's been so long now. Grandchildren have to accuse their grandparents of being murderers. And this grandson put his quote unquote proofs on. What source did he put these on? A TikTok.
Reddit.
Obviously. There's some others, but none of them are likely. The leading suspect is a man named Arthur Lee Allen. Lee is spelled Leigh. He was born in 1933, sort of made him kind of the right age, mid-30s, when these murders occurred. He was a teacher, but he also had a lot of odd jobs. You'll see why in a minute, because he was a pedophile. And he grew up in Vallejo, California. He lived in Vallejo, California. He was in the Navy. He was honorably discharged in December of 1959. But he later would become a teacher. He was, by the way, a collegiate trampoline champion in 1959. So
that's
athletic.
Interesting.
It is weird.
Trampoline.
But he was. I'm not going to go into super detail about Arthur Lee Allen, but he was the definite suspect number one for the San Francisco police. Not so much. I mean, I think a little bit of Vallejo looked into it too, but he was absolutely on primary radar for the San Francisco police. He was interviewed as early as October 6, 1969, which is not long after the murder of Paul Stein, by Detective John Lynch of the Vallejo Police Department, because someone has seen someone who looked like him in the vicinity of Lake Berryessa on September 27th. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was after that was before the Paul Stein murder, after the Berryessa murder. So he was already in the radar of local police, local being Vallejo, before the Paul Stein killing in San Francisco. And he told the detective, Arthur Lee, Arthur Lee Allen told the detective that, I was going to go to Lake Berryessa on that day, but I changed my mind last minute. Instead, I went scuba diving at Salt Point State Park. What? Why would you even say you were going to?
Yeah.
You were seen in the vicinity nearby where the murder took place at Lake Berryessa. It's so he was on the radar almost immediately, right there, contemporaneously.
Yeah.
He had a friend named Don Chaney who lived down in Southern California. He told the Manhattan Beach, which is kind of near Los Angeles, that Allen had told him, like, I want to kill people. He said he had used the name Zodiac as kind of a nickname for himself, and that he had seen him, like, he bound a flashlight to a gun, which you'll recall the Zodiac said he did in the early murders there.
Yep.
Don Chaney was kind of a frenemy, though, more so than a friend, though. So some people have taken, he's just,
Right.
kind of throw Allen under the bus. But the Vallejo police also looked into it in conjunction with the inspectors from San Francisco PD, and that he admitted to having bloody knives on the day of the Berryessa killing. And he's like, "Why did you have these bloody knives?" And he said, I used them to kill chickens. Who kills chickens in 1969?
Well, I mean,
There's KFC, for God's sake.
people kill chickens.
No, he
but
wasn't killing any motherfucking chickens. He lived in the city.
But are you killing chicken with knives?
At Lake Berryessa. I'm just going to bring some chickens to Berryessa and kill some. It makes
And
no
then
sense.
just carry. I mean, where did he have the knives? Carrying them around in his car?
He had him. He was in like a bag or something like that. This is later on. This is August of 1971 when they interviewed him about the knives. Right?
Okay.
And he admitted it, though. I know I'm doing a terrible job.
Yeah.
I'm very sketchy, but there was a significant amount of attention paid to him by the police. They had some good reason to believe he was involved, and they questioned him multiple times. They got search warrants at one point. They weren't able to find anything. They weren't able to connect him. It's a little bit like Ross Sullivan, where it's like the Riverside Police Department said, "We're pretty sure we know who did it."
Wait a second. They weren't able to find anything, but they found bloody knives?
They found bloody knives, but I don't know if they found the bloody knives, but he admitted to having them. Someone had seen him with bloody knives, and he admitted that, I had some knives with blood on them, but I was killing chickens. I was using them to kill chickens.
Oh, they didn't actually find
No,
the
they
bloody.
didn't.
Okay.
They didn't.
Okay.
I'm messing this up. I know that.
Sure.
Because I
You are. You're really messing
I
this
am.
up.
I want to kind of wrap it up. I just want to say, look into. This is where I say, do your own research. I'm not going to say that because that's horrible.
Yeah.
But
if you are interested in
if you're
this, then you do want to read all of the details about.
a really interesting Netflix special on him about 3 long with his family. I won't go belabor that again. His family, a mother and her 2 kids. Arthur Lee Allen was like best friends, and he in fact, he for sure molested the daughter, and he was very friendly with them. But that family came to believe that he was a murderer.
Yeah.
And their mom would just deny it. And she just didn't want to admit it to herself, but they came to connect him. It's a really interesting episode. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. But it's a really good short, I think 3-part documentary on Netflix that ties Arthur Lee Allen to the murders. It's very well done. Now, I'm not saying everything they say is true. Because they also get him down to Southern California, nearby Riverside, during the Cherry Joe Bates murders, which I'm very skeptical about to have him do those murders. They also get him down to Southern California to commit one of those murders along the beach too, by the way, a sniper murder.
Okay.
One of the ones I mentioned earlier. So I don't know. That almost weakens their case in my mind, I think. But in 1964, he was arrested for being lewd with a 9-year-old boy, and he was sent to a Atascadero State Hospital, and he lost his job as a teacher. So the rest of his life, he just he did odd jobs. He worked in kind of odd jobs back up in Vallejo, living with his parents, and eventually they died, and he inherited that house from them in Vallejo, and he would just mess with, the police. He would never admit it, but they always suspected him. They could never find conclusive proof that he did it.
Yeah.
I think most cops would say
probably
very likely is the Zodiac killer. His incarceration fits perfectly with the letters starting and stopping.
Right.
So it's just there's some really interesting cases there that are some really interesting parallels and some interesting evidence and suggestions that he does. But I'll admit it's not absolutely conclusive at all. But it's like little things like he wore a Zodiac watch that had that symbol. It was a diver watch. It's a scuba watch.
Yeah.
And that symbol is on a watch that he owned. It's one of those little
Yeah.
things, like you have these little tidbits. It had that same logo. That's probably where he got that logo. Michael Mageau, actually, which was the survivor
Right.
of one of the Vallejo murder attempts, he identified him in a photo lineup in 1991.
Oh.
Is that conclusive? For the same
No,
reason, but
but-
that's better than voice.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And it was literally him. We
Yeah.
knew he was a victim. And
yeah, I mean, Michael Mageau would later say that at the time, it's like, why didn't you identify this guy at the time? And he said, well, they never showed me any pictures of the suspects, because remember, they suspected him at the
Yeah.
time, and they never
Yeah,
showed him
that-
pictures during the time. They just asked if he recognized certain names, and he didn't know the name. So he
do
said
you think
no.
he identified him, showed his I mean, that's
The police
ridiculous.
have denied that and said, no, we're not that dumb. We would
Yeah.
never have done that. But why didn't they show him
Yeah.
a photo lineup of Arthur
Yeah.
Lee Allen or whatever, whoever they're, Gaikowski, whoever else?
Yeah.
He said they never showed me a picture.
Huh.
In 1991, when journalist, I believe it was, showed him the picture, he said that's
Yeah.
it. So that's interesting too.
That is interesting.
Yeah. But I want to be fair. Donald Folk, he was one of the cops who was in San Francisco, who did briefly talk to what we think is the Zodiac murder when they asked him, did you see a black guy here? He said he didn't like that Arthur Lee Allen did not look like the person he saw. That was in, still, that was decades later.
Yeah.
We just don't know. But it is contradictory evidence that maybe it wasn't Arthur Lee Allen. I don't know. Nancy Slover, who thought it was, she was the one, the Vallejo dispatcher. She said Arthur Lee Allen's voice didn't sound like the person she remembered.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I trust her sound memory.
Yeah.
And I think the vocal evidence is pretty useless. Here's one of my favorites, though. The Cherry Joe Bates letter was in Elite or Pica typeface on a Royal typewriter. Arthur Lee Allen had a Royal typewriter with Elite typeface. I know that's
did it drop the L?
I don't know.
That's how they always catch them.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's the SFPD, and I believe in the Vallejo PD. A lot of folks there thought he was the killer. Not all of them did.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who were part of the investigation who thought, we've got our guy. We just can't prove it. So I don't know. We'll see. Another thing is that there was some DNA taken much later. I think in the 2020s, they took some DNA from one of the postage stamps and did not trace it, did not connect it to Arthur Lee Allen. I'm hugely skeptical of what would that be, 50-year-old? Yeah. 50-year-old supposed DNA from a postage stamp that could have been licked by the Zodiac. Maybe was never licked by the Zodiac, though, but was handled or had trace DNA from God knows who, including postal workers or law enforcement, things like that. So that's not, this is a pet peeve of mine where you have DNA evidence that supposedly exonerates people. It often doesn't exonerate. It's not positive proof, but it doesn't mean it's negative proof. In this case, I think that's the situation. No, you don't have DNA that connects the murders to Arthur Lee Allen, but no, just because you have something, a DNA from post doesn't it mean it exonerates Arthur Lee Allen. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
So that's just me. I think it was called, the 3-part mystery, by the way, is called This is the Zodiac Speaking. It was Netflix. It premiered in 2024. I'm not going to say everything in there is true. The family could have memory, misremembering things. They could be exaggerating things. I don't know. The family members are interviewed in that. It is a very interesting case. I'm not saying believe everything said in that, but it is something worth viewing. And they were unequivocal as that Arthur Lee Allen was almost certainly. In fact, they claim
these are what family members?
His family? It's the family that the Sea Watchers.
Oh, his
Phyllis
friends.
Seawater was like a good friend of his. She was a
Okay.
fellow teacher when he was still teaching,
Okay.
and he would take the kids out like to the beach and out
I do.
diving and things like that.
Yeah, I vaguely remember this. So probably you told me
it's
about it.
interesting.
Yeah.
And they connect into a lot of, like I said, they connect into that killing in Tiegas Point in Santa Barbara County on the beach because he was there and he took him there and he looked over he left him in the car and went to the bluff and then came back to the car and it was the bluff where they believed the murderer had done it 5 or more than 5 years before that. Or I can't remember.
That makes me even more suspicious.
It makes me a little like
They're trying to connect
I
to
think
me.
so too.
It seems like they are trying to connect themselves to it.
I think they are.
First,
and they also claim that he is effectively, like in his old age, he died in 1992. not long before they died, one of the kids, I can't remember which one it was, I think it was one of the sons, went to him and basically, asked him, and it's like he didn't deny it.
Yeah.
And if you don't deny that you're the killer,
Sure.
you're basically admitting you're the killer. But is that, I don't know. I don't want to claim that everything they say is the God's honest truth. I don't know.
Yeah.
So still, that is an interesting story. There are a lot of connections between Arthur Lee Allen and the Zodiac killing. I think, again, just he lived there. He was weird. He had he had bloody knives. He was sighted in Lake Berryessa at the time of those murders. He was very strange. Personality-wise, this is totally speculative or even subjective, but he just feels like the kind of guy who would do this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
He was iconoclastic. He was never married,
and
he was a weird dude.
The pop psychology.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Explanation is if he's a pedophile, he can't act in a socially acceptable manner, act on his sexual urges, right?
Yeah.
So he has hatred for people who can, which would be young people going to lovers' lanes and stuff like that. That could be a motive for.
And he was also connected to that restaurant where Farron, what was her first name, worked. It was the second murders.
Yeah.
Who
was cheating on her husband with the kid.
Yeah. He was connected to that restaurant, and he, according to his friend Don Chaney, he said, "Hey, there's this waitress I've got my eye on at the restaurant that she worked in, almost certainly meaning her." I remember that was the weird case because they
said she had like a stalker.
She had a stalker,
Yeah.
and they saw a car following them. Her and God, I'm drawing a blank on the.
Yeah, I don't remember his name either.
But they saw a car following them on their way over to the park.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my personal opinion.
He does sound like the most likely.
guy to have done it. So I'm not going to say we have solved. Notice I didn't call this Zodiac killings solved ! Because that's arrogant. It's not true. It could have been a couple of these people. It very well could be someone no one's ever suspected.
Yeah.
And he's for sure the Zodiac killer is dead.
Well,
we'll never know unless we find a trove of
confession letters,
or something like that with proof. By the way, with physical proof. I don't know the rest of Paul Stein's bloody shirt. I don't know unless you find that or some kind of DNA evidence does arise that is connected to someone. We will probably never know for sure who was the Zodiac killer.
Interesting.
And that's probably that and the notoriety. The letters and the toying with the police is what makes this maybe the most famous American serial killer ever.
Yeah. Because it's likely he never confessed to anybody, like never told. Because
if you believe the Seawater kids, he kind of quasi confessed to them. Not really. Long before he died, he was very ill at the end. He had diabetes and. So, I mean, maybe. But
I mean like a guy going to a bar and talking to his friends and bragging and, you know what I mean? Yeah. Trying to be.
It is interesting, though, because this person, again, pop psychology, he was someone who thought a lot of himself. He thought he was brilliant.
Yeah.
And the Zodiac killer clearly thought he was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was so smart, these cryptograms, and no one will ever. I remember they were this couple and not cryptographers figured out the first one, so he made them. I still, the ones that have not. The cryptograms that he wrote that have not been solved, I think are fake.
Right.
I think they're gibberish.
Yeah.
I think he didn't intend them to be solved, but it's easy to never have it be solved. And that adds to his luster, it adds to his legend. I think it's very easy to do that because they're not really cryptograms.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting.
That is the story of the Zodiac killer, Carrie.
Yeah. Solved.
No, I just said not solved.
Dang it.
Point. Or maybe solved with no exclamation point.
Solved for me.
Question mark. How's that?
Okay, that's better.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that story. As we often say, we'll try to bring something a little more uplifting next time. We may not really do that, though.
We may not.
But we'll try.
Thanks for listening.
Okay, see you.
Bye.